Okay. So today we're joined by Lemara. Lemara's a former UVA student in the MARC program. She graduated in
2018.
2018, yeah. So really one of our top students from the MARC program has gone on to work in several offices in California.
Yeah.
And she's going to share some of her work that she's done both in practice in other practices as a kind of consultant, and then her own practice with Andrew, who's also here, another MARC graduate. They have a practice here in town, doing a couple projects that they're going to sort of share with us today. It's a chance to, as we're moving into the second part of the semester, we're going to start talking, about details, another kind of level of resolution in building. So the first part of the semester is really about the sort of primary building materials. And then as we move into the second part, it's about kind of things like building envelopes and cladding and thinking about how, in a really kind of detailed way, how things come together to create enclosure, to create kind of, allow the building to perform in certain ways, to keep water out, to create interfaces for people to touch and interact with the buildings. So the Mars work is great because she's worked at this highly detailed scale, but is also an incredible designer that is thinking big picture, how do you resolve these big ideas through the way materials come together. So thanks, Lemara, for sharing with us today.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Seth. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me here. I'm very excited to share some of my work and experience with you. I graduated here in 2018. As Seth mentioned, I did undergraduate and graduate school at UVA. After I graduated, I went to Gensler, San Francisco, California, which is headquarters of a Gensler. I worked there for a little over 4 years, doing a lot of large projects. All of my three buildings that are built are in Silicon Valley, so large tech campuses. Worked with Google, a little bit did CA for NVIDIA headquarters, worked for Facebook, and a couple projects, Google, Facebook, Adobe headquarters. Some and a few of them are like tenant based, so worked with developer. After Gensler, I worked a little bit at MBBJ, where I shifted a little bit my project type, but still, nevertheless, very large projects. Those were laboratories. I did HMHI. It's Utah's Mental Health University large laboratory, and also BMS. It's a biomedical laboratory that is recently finished building. I got licensed probably around 5 years with my experience, and then around 6 year plus, I transitioned to become a consultant, where I now work for. I have my own company with Andrew Morrell, who's my partner and husband, and also I do consultation for detailing for other companies. Um, so that's a little bit about me. Design and details. I've always were fascinated with visualization. My passion started with visualization and 3D modeling and just enjoying the resolution of the 3D visuals. And I've always was fascinated how are some of those visuals look so real, so well developed. And I come to realization that the details what makes any imaging or rendering much more realistic and much more appealing. And that's where I started developing interest in 3D modeling details. When I was at Gensler, I came in with a great, strong set of skills of 3D modeling that I've learned here at UVA. But over there, I started zooming in into details, and that's how I've learned detailing. I was 3D modeling every single piece, everything that I don't even understand, I would 3D model. And when I did that on a large teams project, we all were learning things from it because we were realizing all the places that we need to coordinate and that actually don't work. While it worked like maybe in the sketch or in 2D conceptually, and when you actually draw and that's became my kind of strength in big work, and I because of that, I was focused and put often to do facades design. So today we'll talk a lot more about kind of much more zoomed in details. And the way I organized my presentation is moving kind of to most recent work. And in the back is kind of my oldest work. So the Gensler large projects at the end of my presentation. We might not get through it all. But first two case studies, I definitely want to go through, and that's what we're going to go through. And then Andrew will add some of his case studies as well. So first case study is Anna Kapp, Architects Valley Club, Santa Barbara, California. I was hired as a consultant to do their details. And a second case study, a much smaller project of our own that we're doing here in town. So I'm starting my presentation with this slide because I think it's very relevant to kind of rest of my work. Tadao Ando is a visionary Japanese architect, embodied the philosophy of emptiness in his design. His minimalist approach, clean lines, geometry, emphasizes fundamental feature and the beauty of the space. His work invokes a deeper connection with space and calming effect by emphasizing a deeper connection with light and nature. It's much later in my career that I realized how much harder it is to do something that feels so effortless and where you just purely appreciate space and materials. So we'll start with Valley Club project in Santa Barbara. To give you a little bit of kind of overview of the project, it's about 7,000 square feet project. It has 3 structures on it, and it's in the budget of it was in a budget of $10 million, and it went over budget by $2 million. So we had to pull back. But just to give you an idea where its ranges in terms of pricing, these are some of a few slides that we've prepared when we met with client, how we approach the concept. Here's a drawing of a car, effortless but not showy. The writing at the bottom says, "Look at me because I'm effortlessly beautiful, not because I'm showy." So this is a concept sketch, and the reason why I brought Tadao Ando before starting showing you this project, because a notion of simplicity, emptiness, void space, and beautiful material, that's all you see in a space. I want to highlight importance of design intent and effort it takes to make something look so effortless and permanent. Space that is intentionally empty, has no finishes. You don't see almost barely no frames, no doors, and no decoration. It has to, nothing can be added. You can solve the detail by adding stuff, but only by subtracting and thus planning ahead. So the sketch shows a very simple concept of planes, but you can see they kind of represent motion. The planes of vertical and horizontal move through the space. So we were learning and getting a lot of inspiration from Richard Serra's sculptures. Studied a lot of his kind of clean and simplicity, but yet powerful sculptures. We've prepared, so in the next few slides, I'll walk through kind of mood and feel of design. But I want to mention something. Our client was also very fascinated with Richard Serra's sculptures, and she very well understood art and a value of clean, empty space. So the mood board represents few key elements and materials in this space. So the first one is walls, and idea was to create a space. The walls should appear as something very heavy, massive, and permanent. Ramdorf to give sense of permanence. Again, more walls, more samples of different types, but ramp earth is what we were leaning towards more. Relationship between walls and the water, studying reflectivity. We also looked into some of Japanese architecture and thus wanted to introduce some screens to introduce warmth and softness to the edges. and create sort of the contrast between what's solid, permanent, heavy, which is a rammed earth or concrete wall, and versus screens. And studied a couple water features to kind of quickly just orient you so you understand where you're oriented in the space for this house. This is conceptual site analysis. This house is located in a California valley, so it's all views around for the most part, and how house, and then really studying the nature and how house sits in the middle. So these are the four volumes of the house. In the center is a main house. This is a guest house. So you can see little paths that connect in between. And this is a pool cabana, a pool house. Very simple geometry, yet it becomes very, very interesting in detailing and challenging when you have such a clean geometry to maintain that. So this is a concept model, physical model. We'll explain you a little bit how we finalize the concept. Our client is an artist, an art collector. Her vision for the house was to feel clean, to make it feel like a clean canvas. She appreciates simple, planar geometries. She had few of her own collections of art. A team studied Richard Serra's sculptures and Japanese architecture to come up with a concept based on simple planes and interplay of walls and roof. It's kind of a dream client when you're an architect to have a client who appreciates clean lines and understands art and how space or value of a space in its emptiness, not what in it. And that's something I think this client was kind of dream client for us. Conceptually, entire project can be explained in the two key details, and this model shows it very well. You essentially have two moments where traditional kind of way where a wall comes up and the roof rests on top. And then there's another moment where wall passes and the roof and kind of pinches the roof from both sides, or could be that one side. So interplay between, right, where it's pinches on one side but resting on the other. So that play, there's only kind of big two major details in the project. That's an overview of it. We wanted walls to be rooted in a landscape and even conveyed as ruins, as if it's always been there. So nothing is finished here. It's a self-finishing rammed earth wall, defined four volumes that you saw: main house, guest and garage, and a pool house. And the raw material is the goal of the project. The height of the walls were dictated by structural requirements. Conceptualized as a contemporary ruin that could have existed in location for centuries, a series of earthen walls serve as a primary organizational element, delicate roofs elegantly inserted between the parallel walls, providing shelter while allowing nature to sit in. So before we jump into details, like next step, we will start jumping into details. I break this down into just basic detailed terms that are very familiar to you to help you to locate what you're looking on a page. We'll compare renderings to detail, and you'll see some of the renderings several times because we're going to look at different parts of that rendering. I divide it into thresholds and transitions, gap and voids, blind or blind edges versus edges, juncture and seams, interlock and notch, pivot versus hinge. Threshold and transition is again familiar term to you, and it's how we move through the space. It's how we treat the space between doorways and how we achieve a material change. So first detail I'm showing here is this large opening. So that's where the sliding doors on both sides are. When it's completely open, This is about 50 feet long opening on two sides. When it's completely open, you have a sense of, as if it's always been open, right? Sense of permanence. There is no even a hint, or barely, I have to point out to you where the doors are and where the railing of the door and the ceiling and the top. And that's kind of achieves the concept. So when the doors are open, the space itself become like a gallery, and walls become like a sculpture in a space, and the pool cabana become just a backdrop in this space. But if we look closely, so this moment right here from inside to outside called threshold, and you almost barely can perceive it. You can see the tiny lines here at the top. Those are three metal slivers there. That's the door hiding behind this concrete wall. And then there is, again, the sill that's rests at the bottom here. Move to the next. Just wanted to now show you more technical drawing of that moment. So this is the space that we're just looking at from now looking from inside. So it's called pocket door, but like everything else in this project is very custom. So even pocket door is exposed pocket door. So a couple challenges comes with that is when the door is completely open, in a traditional pocket door, it has a pocket to hide, and inside that pocket you have a more structural stability because those are very heavy panels, you can imagine. And also it has a way to stop, right? Because it's inside a pocket, it stops inside. The challenge become here, it's exposed and it needs to be very minimal. How do you stop these three sliding doors that moving it's the how much they weight and the speed at which they're moving, and how do you stop them very cleanly behind the concrete wall? So they're not pocketed, but they're actually right behind on the other side of the wall. So if we zoom closely, so this is about 50 feet opening, and the house has them on two sides. So when the both opens up, it's you have a completely outdoor space while you're inside. Each door, so this is one door, which is about 25 feet. This is about 25 feet plus the pocket. So together they make a 50 feet opening. Each panel is about 8.5 feet. And so they're all stacked behind here and here. Now these two doors are on two sides of a house. And the two sides of a house has that interplay that I was talking about from beginning. There's a two key details here where wall passes and wall stops, and the roof sort of passes the wall. So one condition of that sliding door is here, where the wall and then roof is on top. But another condition, which became a much harder actually moment to resolve, seems a very minor change, but now wall is passes and the ceiling is stopped. And I'll dive deeper into why it's more challenging. So I make sure I didn't leave out anything. Yeah. So the manufacturer was Optima Window Company. Optima is a high-performance window system known for its ultra-slim profiles and minimal sidelines, allowing for large expanses of glass with seamless indoor-outdoor connection, customable, fully customable. You can see even in this detail, remember I mentioned we have no finishes, but even in this detail that is provided by Optima system that we used, they have a finish on the wall and finish on the floor, which we do have. We do have the finish on the floor, but finish on the wall become very challenging. As an architect, you have to kind of think more creatively. How can you still take the same system, still same idea, but now you have no finish, so how do you implement this design? So this is they're showing here two leaves. This is holding first leaf, second leaf, and then there's a pieces to the side that attach to the finished part to create stability. This is our detail where we're looking at three leaves. So three leaves that hiding inside the ceiling. So then you only see the glass on outside. So you only see a gap. And here's the sill where same thing, it's concealed in the floor. The first detail where the ceiling passes through or roof passes and the wall stops underneath, it's what's shown here. Just to point out to you what you're looking at, I know it might look overwhelming, but general idea that you see that there is some kind of extrusions, right, to hold the glass. So these three panels are double panels. Those are three panels of glass. There is a system there, mullion extrusions, that are holding the glass. So that part is what we're hiding inside the ceiling. So when you're looking at the glass or the door, you only see the glass. You don't see any of that heavy structure of it. So window frame concealed in the ceiling. Same thing happening at the bottom. Window frame is concealed in the floor. And it's even, if I could zoom in here, it even has finishes in between. So the gap for your to hold the glass, those tiny gaps are very, very minimal. You only see very tiny 3 lines, almost like quarter inch, maybe half an inch lines. Looking at the top view, so this is the bottom, this is the top, and this is the floor plan view. So you can see here, that's where all the doors will stop. That's the stopping point. And then there's a deeper detail going into how essentially there is a metal reveal that stops all 3 planes in the floor. Looking now at the opposite side of the detail opening where the wall passes the glass, that's the head, that's the top view. And remember how in previous view where the ceiling passes all the way through, we have much more space there to create those wings, extrusions that resting on it to create that balance. We do not have that space here. And again, as an architect, you will, of course, one option was to push it away, but that would start messing with the cleanliness of the lines, relationship when you're looking at the ceiling. Ceiling stops and the door, you don't want the ceiling to continue beyond that. Those are the details that were very, very mattered to this project. So we had to further custom design that piece where we had to eliminate that we create custom extrusion, eliminated that aluminum piece, and instead proposing it to bend to go up. So that's, as an architect, you have that. If project allows, if budget allows, if that's what client wants, you have that ability to do. That's something I didn't learn like when I was in school and learned much later, that you can dictate how you want the design to be. Even the product, even custom product, they would work with you and they will change. They will study the engineers they have on their side, like window manufacturer, and they will design to your condition, to your needs. What matters in that relationship of coordinating and working with manufacturers would be how much you draw. So if you draw a detail convincing enough, say, this is how I want it to look, then they will work with you. Here is that moment where the detail where the doors slide and they stop, kind of what makes them stop when you close the door so they don't keep going, right? When you're closing it, but also when you're shutting the door, when you're pulling this direction, that's the stop that makes it sort of anchor. But also when you opening in the back here, underneath there is a stop, which is also allows it so it doesn't continue sliding beyond. While we're here, I can also talk a little bit about how we've resolved the kind of all these walls passing the roof. Usually roof covers all your waterproofing, but in this case, walls are exposed. And how do you solve that? So this was one of the details we come up with, kind of decoupling this piece so the water would flow underneath. So this become a piece that kind of finishes the look of the wall, but a real waterproofing is running behind, underneath of it. So here's a couple more details. Remember that moment that we talked how we solve when we don't have a finish. So in this case, we proposed to block out the concrete. So you have to, in advance, when they pour a concrete, you have to, in advance, block out the concrete pocket to receive the window that's going to set in inside. That requires a lot of coordination in advance and with contractor, with waterproofing. And each will give you a feedback, and then based on that feedback, you adjust your details. But you first draw how you think it should be done, and then you're working with them back and forth. So, for example, in this detail, I don't remember exactly if this is iteration one or last, somewhere in the middle, I believe. But this is what was proposed. We decided that I've proposed this detail where you would insert the piece and you will block out the concrete, these 2 feet thick concrete walls. You block out the concrete to receive the window. Something we did discuss, do we want to not see at all anything, only glass, or we want to see a little bit? And something we've decided that would be nice to see just a quarter black line of the mullion and then the glass. So that would be set in. And then when we meet with contractor, this is overall our dimensions, and contractor helped us to give a little more tolerance because this is large panels that they have to in the real site move in place and put in place, and they can be, since they're not using a robot hands where it's going to be 100% precise, they can't be that precise, so you have to give a little wiggle room, so you are leaving a little bit of tolerance space in that block out. When you do that, then waterproofing people become not happy. So you kind of go back and forth, providing enough space and yet providing enough space, but maintaining your design. And the entire time you maintaining your design intent and continue coordinating. These are staggered panels, actually worth to mention because again, very long. Essentially, this is like a rest of the house besides the concrete walls or these thick 2 feet walls become a glass house. And all that long glass lines are to keep them very thin. We propose staggering them, so that also was suggested by a manufacturer. That would create a balance, and you end up with smaller mullions. You can still see how large these mullions are, but if we aligned them, they would have been even larger. So those mullions become a little more reasonable size when you stagger them. So this is kind of from a distant view now, looking from the cabana side back at the space when it's fully open. This is much earlier rendering, so you can see it doesn't actually show any reveals. It's a concept level rendering. But I want you to notice how from concept to now design development, so the other renderings that you saw more design development, they didn't change much. The concept and the spirit of the place stayed the same, right? Looking at this and the view that you saw earlier, almost the same. Now you just have more details and you actually thought through how this could work. This could happen. So next, the term that we'll talk about, or you would pay attention on the drawings, would be about blind, edges, passage, and doors and windows. Blind, doors, and windows or opening is anything that is meant to be invisible. It's often used in private entrances. It's also used in places where you want to avoid people going in. Oftentimes in commercial or public projects as well, where you have maybe somehow happen to be that your 2 doors are side by side. One is meant to be entrance, another one is not. So you will create a blind door there. Oftentimes used in places that you want a very secluded and private entrance, or sometimes used just in mechanical spaces that you just want a beautiful wall and kind of invisible entrance. A hidden opening where the edges dissolves into continuity, or otherwise an edge is a deliberate transition. So the two work kind of opposite, blind versus edge. In the blind, you don't see the edge, or otherwise it become an edge. This one is a blind door. It's actually seems like just a wall. It's in a way acting like a wall that is sliding out. So entire wall is shifting. There is no handrail or anything, so it's invisible. You just pull it by one of the ribs and you open it. What's inside of it is a bar. So client wanted the bar. So client wanted when people come in and they do a lot of art exhibition. They wanted people to hang out in the living room, step inside, outside. So the bar wanted to be much more secluded moment. And client's idea was that after some meandering time, they would sort of surprise their guest and open the door, and there's a bar inside. That's the blind door that you saw in the rendering on the other side. Here is a detail of another blind door example in this project for mechanical side. So this exists in Pool Cabana, intentionally colored, just different colors, so you can see where the door is, where the walls are. So a couple things that to pay attention to this. You will do a lot of kind of understanding of the frame, how you hide the frame. So it has to be all flushed with the wall. You would also pick, there's no handle, so you will pick a mechanism that is push mechanism usually. So you will come to the wall that just appears to be flat and just push and it will pop open. And in a case like this where there's a ribs, you just have to coordinate and to a 1/4 inch or 1/8 of an inch detail to make sure all your slots between the wall and the door are well coordinated. Few other terms, gap and void is a control separation and articulation of space, juncture and seam, how materials meet, either blending invisibly or intentionally separated. I'll show a couple of these details that are very standard. I think you will do these details probably on your first day at practice. I think these are details very common. So they're not done only on expensive, but actually in a kind of more medium range houses as well. Idea of gap or reveal, this called a reveal detail, and you usually will hear quarter inch reveal or 1/2 inch reveal. What it means is essentially separating to create a very clean, sharp line between when different materials meet or when material changes direction. So here you will see that crisp dark line is created by separating a floor and a wall by 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch. And I think here we did a 1/4 inch. And then it happens like you can, as a designer, decide how you want to separate. So for example, in this case, the ceiling is passes, right? So the wall stops, finished wall stops, and there is a reveal. You could also think about opposite where the wall is continuous, ceiling is come in, and there is a reveal in the ceiling. So it could be done differently. This is how we did in this project, but there is definitely one is more effective than another. So that's something about shadows and your particular space that you would need to study. When the two materials come together, also in the floor, when you have a change of material on the floor, we've used a 1/4 inch reveal as well. So there is no added piece, or sometimes you will see metal is added as a transition. In this project, everything was minimal, so everything was kind of stemmed from idea of removing. So we just, the detail was done such that it's actually just not touching each other. Just a couple more details view for you. The staggered long glass facade. Again, this is notched into the space. Door with a blacked out concrete where door received. This piece that you see here, that's a handle that you kind of pull to open this 3-slide door. So a lot of these doors, all of them are semi-automated. So because they're so heavy, they get activated as soon as you touch them. Here's a couple views of that. Again, this is looking into a space that is called den at the end of the house. So this is early rendering again, but the concept remained the same. You have this wall disappearing into the wall. See how there is almost no lines of the mullions. very clean, and then in the reflection of the water right by the glass. There was so many different types of window doors apparable in this project. This is a pivot door, and it has 3 pivot doors that, back to back to back. And challenging part again in that is to how you when they lock, how you maintain balance. I mean, they're very heavy, and the pivot door is it's pinned from the top and the bottom in the ceiling and at the bottom. So you do need a ceiling space and a bottom space. That kind of takes me to another detail that becomes even more challenging in the next slides. I know this is a lot of information, so we will go back at some point and I'll ask you if you have questions. So every glass, there are screens in there for a sun blocking. Those screens, they're apparable for almost everywhere, purely so you're able to open them and clean the glass. Not so much, they're not meant to be opened every day, but they are meant to be when they close, be sort of invisible, again, very continuous. There is no break in the rhythm. And there's 2 types of details exist in the project. One is pivoting. Those screens are pivoting. They open and close. Another one is hinged. And I'll explain in a little bit what that means. If you look at this plan here, so this side is hinged and this side is pivoting. It's kind of zooming into that side. So this side is hinged and this side is pivoting. The best way to do is pivot. Pivot is more expensive, but definitely much nicer and clean way to do it. You would learn that too when you start practicing. But pivot does need a top and a bottom, and that is challenging when you don't have a ceiling to pin your door to. So because of that, this detail suddenly different, while seemingly look like exact same design. So from outside, it turns like this, and you want to see it as if it's all continuous and there is no difference. One is pivoting, and one is hinged. So that's a 3-dimensional drawing of it. With the pivot door here, the challenge was when they pivot, they need to not clash into each other. So that's right here become a harder moment. So let me maybe jump in here. So that's the pivoting door. When it's pivot, it has a backside, right? So you want it to not clash. And the way I've resolved this is proposed to have one piece that is permanent. And I've learned that from other architects. I've studied Edlin Darling, and I've realized how that can be solved. You have one piece that is permanent, that not a parable slat of wood, and then next to it you have a parable. And so when it's all closed, it looks all seamless. This is a hinge door. Hinge door is a little bit challenging. Even if you have a most concealed hinge, it's still harder to hide than the pivot door. So you'll still see like a dark line in the middle. But again, there was just a lot of coordination between the spacing. So the spacing had to be dictated by the hinge. Again, when it's all open, it's perfectly straight like this. They're perfectly straight and they're not clashing. And I do these details. I study a lot in 3D, and I study a lot in the motion. I would open the door fully and see how it looks, and I'll open the back and kind of back and forth when I work through this. So this is the next challenging, and I think it's the last detail for this project that I'll show. This is an entrance gate. It's a metal entrance drive gate. So the clearance here is about 12 feet clearance, and then 4 feet on 2 sides. So this is a first, how I've been mentioning several times for for pivot door, you need to have top and bottom. This is the first one here that doesn't have the top. So how do you do a pivot door that doesn't have a top? Oh, it doesn't have a top hinge, so you have nothing to support it from the top. On top of that, it's also off-centered, so you can automatically see how the challenge is that they would want to lean towards one side. It also has nothing to pin at the top. So the solution for this was studied many iterations between starting from a perfect center, moving 1 feet, moving 1 feet, moving 1 feet, and coordinating that with structural, at which point is like, it's the maximum that we can open up, because if you have it perfectly in center, you will have so much wasted space on the other side. You will have like 6 feet on the other side and 6 feet actual what you need on this side to have a 12-foot opening. So those are the kind of study that you would do. And the solution eventually was there was a perfect moment at which we were able to say, okay, 4 feet is what we can work with on one side, with 6 feet on the front of it. And the counterbalancing would be achieved by making one side solid metal strips and another side is hollow metal strips. But from exterior, it has all same colors and it looks all exact same. It's the same material. It's just one is hollow, one is solid to keep that counterbalance. So I'll move to our own work. I'll talk a little bit about it, then Andrew will come in. We work together on this project. I will actually flip through a couple of projects that we're doing. So this project we're working in Lake Anna for a client, and the house is in a pricing right now. We've proposed we had about 3 sets of different finish range and assuming the different price range. So this one is the most appealing to us, one that was appealing to us. That's the one I put here, where we introduced like timber trusses, much nicer finish, and built-in fully kitchen. That's not the view that's going for pricing right now. You'll see slight difference, but we still want to always bring that. It's always good to show your client what kind of view. It's good to listen to your client, to give them what they ask you, but also say, but I also thought about that. Sure, because of the budget, but then there's some pieces that they will take from your better design into their one that they will go with. That's most certainly happens a lot, but it also shows them that you've listened to them. It also shows your skill as well. So it's great to do both. I'll flip through quickly. This is a very simple house. That's the main floor, and it has a little basement. Basement was very important to client. He really wanted basement. It's like this space for healing, for meditation. That's a basement, and for parties. Yeah. That's a living room space. This is another project we did, just a concept, one of actually first earlier project we did, something nice we've built together, designed and thought through details of it. Essentially a house with a brick screen that is kind of decoupled from the actual enclosure, waterproof enclosure. Some of the details we've tested here, implemented from my experience working for high-end residential and some Andrew's experience working at high-end and Ellen Darling, where we try to implement in this kind of case study project. This is a Via Florence project that is currently in construction. And it's here downtown in Charlottesville, not downtown, sorry, here's in Charlottesville. It's in Pentops. It's a very simple traditional house where we proposed. Again, it's one of those like a dream clients. When we meet with client, we've drew first what they ask us to draw, and then we've proposed them what we think should be done. And like you never know the reaction of client, and this client was so appreciative that we did that, because they gave us feedback, said that they appreciate that we are challenging them in the design. So not every client same. So it's always good to propose what you think, and like this client was very appreciative, and they both moved from San Francisco, and maybe there is some kind of common language that we've learned in San Francisco that we able to talk to our client. And so it's been really great experience, because anything we propose, they are like all implementing it right away. Unlike the very first project, Anacapa project that I showed you earlier, this project is slightly different in where it is a custom, but we have to work with standard products available and pretty much not change them. So we have to change our design to such that it looks very custom, work with the products. It's a traditional, like a 3-inch tolerance, so the cabinets can be changed in size with 3-inch increments. Any kind of filling and spaces between would be with that consideration. Just flip through a little bit of a few pages. You would recognize this very traditional windows space in a more or less traditional home. What we've proposed here, they did had a dining area that will be rarely used. What we propose is to have a nice pantry back there where you would have some of your kitchen equipment in there. And they absolutely love that. So the kitchen has a main kitchen and sort of a pantry slash a kind of scullery. It's a area where you do prep for food. So the key working, it's a small project, but a lot of coordination and a lot of very fine-tuning details. Even when we received a shop drawings for the cabinets, we found misalignments that we had to go back and work with the cabinet providers. This drawing is slightly different from previous one, is that we started looking into kind of more further finishes on a backdrop because the first finish that we proposed came back too expensive. And so we've had to work that in. And we actually love the result because this came out to be even nicer. This is kind of close-up renderings of that backsplash. And here's some samples. So when you work with like really closely, you get a lot of samples and you get to pick them by looking at it live. So I believe we're picking that piece. The floors in this project were the same original floors. What we did is a 3-layer of sanding to kind of bring out that light wood and remove the stain that was previously. It was much more red, like a mahogany almost floor that turned into be this like very neutral monotone colors. Some examples how you would always compare your drawings to your sample pieces. These are the stairs too that were very dark wood. I was very happy to see how change in color after 3 layers of sanding it off. Here's this wall color kind of picking. It's almost, they look so same, but until you like paint and look at them, you will see slight tone difference. And that tone difference when it's in the entire room, you will sense it. So slightly warm, slightly cold, and sometimes even appears slightly green. You'd be surprised. So that's the gray color that we picked. We were really trying to find the most neutral part. Few pictures of a construction. So this is where we're building that pantry space. So something you would always need to, drawing is important, and coordinating is the light fixtures needs to be coordinated with your plan. And again, when you're working with different contractors, they don't necessarily look at the whole picture. So the cabinet people redrew their cabinets slightly differently and made some shifts, obviously not considering where the lights is. They don't know where they are. So you as an architect, like you have to always coordinate and bring everybody back to table and make sure it's all working on the line. So we had to come back. Andrew and I came back and we had to point exactly. We marked them with a tape where exactly center of the aisle should be, where exactly center of specific cabinet. While we're providing drawings, it's still not enough. So you have to come and you have to mark them because
drawings on an 8.5 by 11 that they printed out.
that they just throw it aside. Exactly. So
exactly.
It's nice to have a local nice to have a project like here locally so you can always go and watch every step because they would not pay attention. Exactly. Only you will know. Do you want to talk a little bit?
I think this is great to sort of see the effort that goes into making things disappear and seem it's effortless, as you said.
Yeah.
Incredible amount of attention to detail and craft and tolerance. These are the things that you really labor over in the drawings. And so, yeah, hopefully this has really been, it's a great kind of talk about how that's, how to work the magic of what happens, how to kind of conceal the tricks that you use to seem so effortless.
Thank you. Yeah.
The profession about work ethic. I mean, you have to really push everybody to get things working. And
Yes.
I'll just kind of quickly jump through this. This was a project I worked on in San Francisco that is built, and it has a lot of the same themes that Lemara was showing in her custom residence. And you can just see how in this, her project was so simple and clean. This one has so many conditions and so many materials coming together. That's the koi pond running through the house. And just trying to achieve these moments, you can see that's kind of a similar detail where, you've got a floor or a roof passing by a different material. And if we kind of jump in just very, very quickly.
In this type of work, how we were talking about the drawings and how easily the contractors will sort of throw those aside. How often do you find yourself revisiting those drawings on site and talking through, having multiple conversations with, both contractors and fabricators? Like, how do you keep that continuous? How do you keep that as part of their
in there?
star?
Yeah, for that kitchen renovation we're doing in town, it was all discussed beforehand. And they're like, yeah, we know we're going to do it. We're going to recess the plugs on the underside of the cabinets. We're going to recess the LED strip. When it came down to it, they were not going to do it. So I had to, I scrambled, took an hour, drew a very specific detail about how I wanted them to recess it. They then took it, to the kitchen designer, who then spit out a new price for our client. And then they ordered the cabinets. And it's like, if I hadn't caught that, they would end up with something terrible. On a project like this, these projects take 4 years from start to finish. You're in schematic design for a year. So you have a contractor from the very beginning that you're working with, and you're working with them to kind of figure out these details. And at the same time, in this example, we are dealing with screens. Anytime you have a screen in front of glass, you have to figure out how to move it because you have to wash that window. So not only did we figure out how to sort of pivot it, but we built a one-to-one mock-up in the workshop.
Yeah, to add to Steph, I agree. I find that working in California with big contractor firms that are very expensive, they actually done that so many times. And they would even show you a picture of thing or two. Oh, how we solve that corner somewhere else, or a condition like that. So they are on watch out for those details. So they will go into your drawings to see how you did it, how you drew it up. So they're hunting for that moment. Oh, how did they solve that corner? And if they don't understand something, they'll give you a call, and then you discuss with them. Maybe there's a better way to do it that they would propose, or you explain them how you think it should be done, and like, okay, that can be done. And they get excited when it's very detailed. They're like, wow, this is going to be so nice. It's going to be nice. We're going to photograph that. So that's kind of the difference between the contractor you get for project like that versus the contractor will work here, and the products will work here. It's kind of off the shelf. So that is much harder, and we educate them almost how to do things, how to get things done, because they haven't done that, and that nobody asked them even. Even a custom cabinet lady who is here in Charlottesville never done that.
There's a little pushback.
It depends on what price range level you're working with. It's a different people when you're working at that level. It's
a different client type too. I mean, when you have someone who can spend 20 million in cash versus someone who's about to put their life savings on a construction loan, that 20 million cash, they'll pay for the best contractor, and they'll bring someone in if they don't have it.
The concrete walls, the 2 feet with the insulation in the middle.
So did you not end up doing the rammed bridge?
We did not because that got VE'd, but we did do a concrete that is with the pigment of a brown colors. Roof became so thick, something to make it look straight, right? There's inside of it actually there's a slope, there's internal gutters inside of it. So it's ended up becoming over 2 feet.
And the roof is steel, I think that's all it is.
Yes, it's a steel structure. Yeah.
What's interesting that I didn't realize this before, but that detail where Lemara had the kind of piece at the top of the rammed earth wall that was separated, and then you flash down through it.
Yeah.
I have a very similar detail on the project I worked on, but I think yours is much better. We just saw cut into the side of the concrete
Yeah.
and then put the flashing in it. But doing it
This
like
is
that,
topping.
yeah, is much better.
So it's cast as like two different casts.
You will cast your main piece without that like concrete cap.
Right.
So that's separate piece so it would be precast concrete cap later. But I think the difference between like one you're talking about probably was that I'm sure it was pre-designed, right? Yeah.
There's just a lot of ways to do things.
Coordinated like in advance. Concrete wall is not given at all, so you have to coordinate a lot. And I'm sure WG will tell you a lot of stories how he had to coordinate in his addition, the switches and things. I remember him talking about it, but yeah, this project is like a lot of that coordination. Yeah.
Okay, well, I think that's out of time, but thank you so much.